You call it rejection, you name it abandonment, you label it betrayal. But what if it's none of these things? What if every man who has ever walked away from you was actually walking toward your freedom? What if every door that closed before you was revealing the prison you've built around yourself? The pain you feel when he leaves isn't about his absence. It's about the chains you didn't know you were wearing until he refused to hold them. You've been taught that love is possession, that commitment means control, that to be chosen is to be validated. This is the lie that bleeds you dry. Your desperate need for his approval is not love. It's dependency disguised as devotion. Your fear of his departure is not loyalty. It's imprisonment masquerading as passion. The truth cuts deeper. He's not rejecting you. He's showing you where you're not free. When he turns away, he turns a mirror toward you. It reflects not your inadequacy, but your invisible cage. You thought he was your shelter. But shelters become prisons when you forget how to live outside. They're walls. You believed he was your completion. But no person completes another. They only reveal what's missing within. His departure is not your punishment. It's your invitation to reclaim the sovereignty you surrendered at the altar of belonging. Since childhood, you were conditioned to believe your worth depends on being chosen. Your mother's anxious eyes watching your father's mood. Your fairy, tales ending with rescue, never self-creation. Society whispered, be wanted, be desired, be kept. Religion murmured, be obedient, be modest, be claimed. Culture shouted, be beautiful enough, accommodating enough, small enough to be selected. And so you learned to shape yourself into what others might want. You practiced the art of anticipating needs before your own. You became fluent in the language of self-erasure. You called this virtue. You named it love. But it was fear wearing devotion's mask. Every compromise that silenced your voice. Every desire you buried to keep peace. Every boundary you abandoned to prove yourself worthy. These were not acts of love, but surrenders of sovereignty. And now you wonder why his departure feels like death? Because you've made his presence the permission for your existence. This is not love. This is captivity. He's not rejecting you. He's refusing to be your jailer. Remember how you checked your phone 100 times, searching for the validation of his message? Remember how you studied his moods like sacred texts, hoping to decipher the pathway to his approval? Remember how you edited your words, filtered your thoughts, curated your very being to fit the narrow space he seemed to allow for you? That was not devotion. That was disappearance. You became smaller with each accommodation, less vibrant with each compromise, less authentic with each calculated response designed to maintain his interest. The woman he first met began to vanish, replaced by a careful construction built from the blueprint of his preferences. Is it any wonder he walked away? He was looking for a woman with fire in her eyes, not ashes where her soul should be. Your parents modeled this dance of disappearance, your mother always watching the weather of your father's emotions, adjusting herself accordingly. Never too loud, never too much, never to herself. You learned that love meant making yourself digestible, palatable, easy to consume and discard. Religion reinforced these chains with gilded language. It called your self-erasure sacrifice, your silence submission, your fear respect. You learned to glorify your own diminishment and call it virtue. Culture completed your captivity through endless images of women chosen for their ability to contort. Magazines, movies, music, all whispering the same poison. Be less to be loved, be smaller to be seen, be silent to be heard. This indoctrination was so complete that you mistook its wounds for wisdom. Freedom is not a state to achieve, but a truth to remember. The existential reality of your being was never contingent on another's choice. Sartre spoke of radical freedom, that terrible burden of choosing ourselves into existence. Simone de Beauvoir warned that making ourselves an object for another's subjective desire is the greatest abdication. You cannot pour yourself into the shape of someone else's need and call it authenticity. The attachment that binds you to his approval is the same force that separates you from your essence. Your desperate grip on his presence is precisely what makes you absent from yourself. Consider the paradox. In seeking validation through his eyes, you've blinded yourself to your own vision. This dependence is not a failure of love, but a misunderstanding of freedom. True connection cannot exist between a prisoner and a captor. It emerges only in the sacred space between two sovereign beings who choose each other anew with each dawn. He's not rejecting you. He's refusing the false self you've offered in place of your freedom. The pain you feel is not loss but birth, the violent emergence of what was always meant to be unconstrained. Heidegger named this authentic existence, the courage to stand in one's own being without deflection or disguise. Not hiding behind the convenient masks of the they, but facing the abyss of your own singular existence. This abyss terrifies you, so you fill it with another's presence. You pour his approval into the void where your self-recognition should stand. But no other person can bear the weight of your existence. No lover can carry the burden of your self-creation. When you make him responsible for your worth, you transform love into tyranny. When you build your home in his regard, you become a refugee in your own life. Nietzsche knew this truth. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. Your tribe taught you that a woman alone is a woman incomplete. That solitude equals failure. That independence is the consolation prize for those who couldn't secure attachment. These are sophisticated lies designed to keep you dependent, controllable, small. Kierkegaard understood that anxiety is the dizziness of freedom. The vertigo you feel when he walks away is not abandonment but awakening, the first tentative steps into the vastness of your own potential. Your fear of his rejection is actually fear of your own power. Because to stand complete is to stand responsible. To claim your freedom is to lose the comfort of blame. It's easier to make him the author of your story than to face the blank page of self-determination. But authorship is the price of authenticity, and authenticity is the prerequisite for love. What if rejection is actually an invitation to discover the woman who exists beyond the need to be chosen, the woman who stands complete before seeking completion in another, the woman who loves not from emptiness but from overflow. This is the radical virtue that awaits you. Self-possession before partnership, wholeness before union, freedom before devotion. Imagine loving not because you need to be loved in return, but because giving love is the natural expression of your abundance. Like the sun that shines not to be praised for its light, but because radiance is its nature. This love doesn't grasp or cling. It doesn't negotiate or plead. It doesn't shrink to accommodate another's fear. This love expands. It liberates. It says, I see you fully, and I choose to walk beside you, not because I need you to complete me, but because I delight in sharing my completeness with you. When you stand in this sovereignty, rejection loses its power. Another's departure becomes merely information, not about your worth but about alignment, not about failure but about truth. The woman who loves from freedom doesn't fear abandonment because she never abandons herself. She doesn't perform to be chosen because she has already chosen herself. She doesn't need approval because she approves of her own existence with fierce acceptance. This is not selfishness. This is the prerequisite for authentic connection. Because he's not rejecting you, he's creating space for your liberation. This new virtue requires courage. The courage to stand alone before standing together. The fortitude to face what you've been avoiding through constant connection. It demands you confront the emptiness you've been filling with relationships, the silence you've been drowning with distraction, the questions you've been answering with another's certainty. This virtue calls you to befriend your own darkness, to walk willingly into the forest of your fears, to sit with your own shadow until you recognize it not as enemy but as teacher. Only then can you offer authentic presence to another. Only when you've claimed yourself can you share yourself without desperation or demand. This is love that liberates, rather than binds. Connection that expands rather than constricts. Intimacy that illuminates rather than obscures. The sun doesn't shine to receive light in return. The river doesn't flow to be filled by what it nourishes. The mountain doesn't stand to be validated by the valley. You were not born to be completed by another. You were born complete, a universe contained in flesh, a mystery housed in bone. Your completeness doesn't negate your desire for connection. It transforms it. From desperate grasping to generous offering, from anxious attachment to abundant sharing. This is the new virtue. To love not from lack, but from fullness. To give not to receive, but because giving is the natural expression of having enough. When you stand in this sovereignty, his rejection becomes irrelevant. Not because it doesn't hurt, but because the hurt no longer defines you. It becomes weather passing through the vast sky of your being, acknowledged, felt, but never mistaken for the sky itself. But even this liberation must eventually dissolve into silence. There comes a time when you must stop defining yourself through relationships altogether, even the relationship with your own freedom. The truest power lies in impermanence, in knowing that attachments, identities, and even hard-won independence must all be surrendered to the void that renews all things. This is the final liberation, to hold your sovereignty lightly, to recognize that even self-possession is a temporary form, a vessel meant to be filled and emptied countless times. Retreat now into the silence beneath the stories of rejection and redemption. Feel how both pain and power are waves on the same ocean of consciousness. In this silence, there is no rejection. There is no acceptance. There is only the eternal present where all things merge and separate in perfect rhythm. Let your identity die into this silence. Let your need for validation dissolve. Let even your newfound strength evaporate like morning dew returning to the air. What remains when all these layers are shed? The vast, unconditioned awareness that was never touched by rejection in the first place. This is maturity, not to overcome rejection, but to transcend the very concept of it, to move beyond the cycle of abandonment and attachment into the stillness where all seeming opposites are reconciled. He didn't reject you. He didn't liberate you. These were only appearances on the surface of a much deeper truth. And that truth awaits you in the silence between your thoughts, in the space between your heartbeats, in the pause between your breath. The ocean doesn't fear the departure of a wave. The sky doesn't grieve the passing of a cloud. The desert doesn't lament the shifting of its sands. You are not the temporary forms of your experience, but the awareness in which all forms arise and dissolve. This awareness cannot be rejected. It cannot be abandoned. It cannot be diminished or enhanced by another's presence or absence. The silence speaks a wisdom beyond words. Everything changes. Everything passes. Everything returns to source. Your attachments, your identities, your very sense of self. All are impermanent forms arising in the formless ground of being. Your pain when he leaves is the resistance to this impermanence. Your suffering is the struggle against the natural rhythm of emergence and dissolution. Even your newfound freedom must eventually be surrendered. Even your hard-won sovereignty must ultimately dissolve back into the silence from which it arose. This is not defeat but fulfillment, not loss but completion, not death but transformation. The caterpillar doesn't cling to its former shape when becoming a butterfly. The seed doesn't mourn its shell when growing into a tree. The river doesn't resist the ocean when merging with its vastness. Neither should you cling to any identity, whether defined by his presence or by your independence from it. True maturity is knowing when to assert and when to surrender, when to speak and when to listen, when to stand firm and when to yield. There is a time for claiming your worth and a time for releasing all claims. There is a season for building boundaries and a season for dissolving them. There is a moment for declaring your freedom and a moment for recognizing that even freedom is a concept arising in boundless awareness. This is the paradox that transcends all others. Only by letting go of everything, including your cherished liberation, do you discover the freedom that can never be taken away. Now you stand at the threshold between your old perception and this new understanding. Will you continue to interpret departure as rejection? Or will you recognize it as revelation, the unveiling of where you've surrendered your freedom? The choice is yours. It has always been yours. Write in the comments, "His absence reveals my freedom." Make this declaration not as a defense against pain, but as a recognition of truth. Not as a mask for wound, but as a commitment to wholeness. Because ultimately, he's not rejecting you. He's not even showing you where you're not free. He's merely the mirror in which you glimpse your own reflection, sometimes distorted by fear, sometimes clarified by love, but always, always your own. And when you fully embrace this truth, you'll find that the door he closed behind him wasn't locking you out. It was opening you up to the vastness that was always yours to claim. Stay for the next video, where we explore how this freedom transforms not just your romantic connections, but every relationship in your life. But for now, remember, the one who walks away only takes himself. Your sovereignty remains, untouched, undiminished, and waiting for you to remember its power. This is your moment of decision. Will you retreat back into the familiar comfort of victimhood? Or will you step forward into the exhilarating responsibility of authorship? Will you continue to make his choices the author of your worth? Or will you reclaim the pen and write your own story? Will you interpret his departure as evidence of your inadequacy? Or will you recognize it as the catalyst for your emergence? The wounds of rejection are real. The pain of abandonment cuts deep. I don't dismiss these truths or diminish their impact, but wounds can be portals if we allow them to be. Pain can be the breaking open that precedes breakthrough. Your suffering is not meaningless if you don't waste it. Your heartbreak is not purposeless if you let it crack open the shell of who you thought you were. Declare now your commitment to this alchemical process. Announce your willingness to transform rejection into revelation, abandonment into awakening, loss into liberation. Type in the comments, "His absence reveals my freedom." Say it not as mere words, but as incantation. Not as slogan, but as sacred vow. Not as escape from pain, but as embrace of truth. Because when you truly understand that he's not rejecting you, he's showing you where you're not free, you reclaim the power you've been giving away with every desperate attempt to be chosen. This understanding doesn't erase the past. It transforms it. It doesn't deny the hurt. It redeems it. And in that redemption, you discover the most liberating truth of all. The love you've been seeking outside yourself has been within you all along, waiting patiently for you to turn toward its light. This is not the end of your story. It's the beginning of one you write yourself, with sovereignty as your pen and freedom as your page. Watch our next video to discover how this wisdom applies, not just to romantic relationships, but to every connection in your life. But for now, remember, when he walks away, he creates space for you to walk toward yourself. And that journey, the journey home to your own heart, is the only one that truly matters.